I'm taking C. I keep making this mistake where I put the ammo crates too close to the wall, when it's very likely that the enemies are on the other side of the wall. And then I resupply my enemies. Hi guys, it's Mattiace, and yet again I want to start off a video by giving you one of those quick little advices, and in this case I'm using myself as an example of making a mistake of putting the crate too close to a wall where if the enemies are on the other side, as I pointed out, they will be resupplied. And I've brought this up several times in the past also where it's been the other way around. I've been on the opposite side of a wall and the enemies resupply me through that wall. I think the last time I mentioned it was in my last Villa Perosa video. So, it's been more than 5 years of Battlefield 1 and I've been streaming it since beta. And man, there has been epicness, there has been frustration, there has been drama, there has been discussions, but I would say that for the most part it has been a really great experience. And whatever happens with Battlefield 2042 Portal, if we actually decide to leave Battlefield 1 based on that game, I'm going to miss a lot of what we've experienced in this epic success from DICE and EA. Now, as a streamer, the drama didn't take long before it started hitting my channel. The first drawn-out discussions that I, at least as far as I can remember, that I was part of was the imbalance of the light tank during beta. And the interesting thing about this, the reason why I want to bring it up, is that these kinds of discussions have a tendency to repeat themselves, and I recognized the arguments and the frustration from certain aspects of these discussions from previous games and previous discussions that I've had, mainly based on PlanetSide 2. You see, it's quite unbelievable if you still remember how overpowered especially it was the howitzer loadout that was really overpowered in that part of the game. There were actually quite a number of people that defended the tank being as powerful as it was, or as imbalanced as it was. And what I found the most remarkable about this is the very specific arguments that some players used in order to maintain this imbalance. And what I noticed was that they used a very common way of arguing in toxic discussions. It's called projection, where you accuse your opponent for your own flaws. And in this case, they called out all the players complaining about the tank for being bad players, when in fact the only reason why you would want a tank to be this imbalanced is because said player needs this imbalance in order to do good. Mainly because if they would play normally and on even terms with the rest of the players on the server, they would do far worse. And I gotta admit, when I was in these kinds of discussions before Battlefield 1, it actually caught me so off guard that I didn't really know how to handle it, and that made those discussions even worse, at least from my experience. Now this thing, projecting, knowing about this is actually something that can help you out a lot in a lot of situations, even outside of gaming in your real life. Because understanding that this is a very common way that dishonest people use in order to spread lies and false accusations, especially when they don't have any valid arguments and when they have been proven wrong. Now this thing with projecting, it happens a lot, and it's also happened a lot further on in the discussions about Battlefield. One of the things about this is the attacks towards me have been surprisingly consistent throughout the years. And one of the things that tells us is that people that rage and flame and cry and bitch a lot, they very rarely try to even remotely gather any facts. Instead, it's much more common that they try to pretend that they know a lot by artificially changing their voice, talking a bit slower and a little bit more calmly in a way to sound mature and more intellectual, while in fact if you listen to what they say instead of how they say it, is just equally wrong. Some people are just very convincing when they say things that are completely wrong. Now, the most common accusations that I get from people that are, for whatever reason, angry or frustrated is that they call out my playstyle or me as a player as somebody who only fly planes, or in some cases only fly planes and drive tanks. Funny as it is, it's happened so many times on my secondary channel, which I have purposely dedicated to planes and tanks in order to keep some of my playstyles a little bit separate, which is especially more important now that I'm streaming on this very channel that you're watching this on right now. You see, my secondary channel has at this point in time less than 10,000 subscribers, but it did grow rapidly during a short period of time, and it was especially during this period of time that a lot of people thought that this was my actual main channel and this is how I played all the time. And I had to consistently keep repeating to these people that I actually have far more kills playing infantry than I have with all the planes and all the vehicles combined. Now again, this kind of rage, flame and accusations is nothing new, but when I started playing Battlefield, I was already prepared for it, based on some of the reactions I had playing, again, PlanetSide 2. Now funny about that, it's amazing how much of a difference it can make in any kind of discussion if you can predict what your opponents are going to say. If you, in any kind of discussion, anytime there is something controversial happens, if you can understand ahead of time what is likely to be the kind of accusations you're going to be met with. Gaming really is like that. For obvious reasons, what this brings our attention to at this point in time is of course Battlefield 2042 Portal. No! I had to put on a gas mask! So now, one of the things that made me quite concerned about Portal is the lack of ability to be able to constructively discuss problems when they occur. And one of the things that I've seen repeatedly time and time again is that when a big portion of the community see a major problem, instead of us discussing the actual problem, we end up in a discussion of whether or not this very clear problem actually is a problem or not. So I want to bring up a relatively recent example for this, and that is the visibility problem that caused a lot of drama in the Battlefield 5 community. Now the fact that the graphic design in Battlefield 5 was in such a way that it was in many situations almost impossible to see an enemy, this was something that a lot of people didn't recognize, and what I've seen throughout countless of discussions about a variety of different problems throughout the years is that people that, maybe because of their playstyle or maybe because of their inexperience, they can't see an obvious problem. Those kinds of people have a surprising ability when it comes to writing walls of text, minimizing or even completely denying a problem, especially if this problem doesn't affect them all that much because of their playstyle, which is different from, well, those people who are affected by the bug. And I just have to bring up another issue that has caused similar discussions, and that is all those places where you get stuck, or where at least where the movement of the game doesn't function as it should, and then you end up in discussions with people that, well, let's say they mainly camp behind a rock with the sniper rifles, and they therefore, because of their playstyle, are not affected all that much by game issues that are related to movement. Now you'd think that the majority of the people that would engage in a discussion about balance or problems or, improvement of the game, you'd think that the majority of the people playing this game would have a common interest, that we would all benefit from improving the game. But more often than not, you're being met with insults about how the problem is with you, you're a noob, you're inexperienced, you don't know how to play the game, and so what. And again, it comes back to projection, as I mentioned earlier in the game. Now pay attention in just a few seconds how I'm going to be able to kill a very, very experienced player named Rusvik. And the reason why this is such a good example is because he gets stuck on that little slope up there, or that ledge. He falls down, tries to jump up again, and this is a very, very common, very annoying bug that's been with us for as long as beta. And you'll see me triggering the same bug in just a few seconds as I try to climb up that very same place. Now this is a classic example where a lot of players wouldn't realize that this is a flaw of the game, and instead they would blame the player. But I can assure you, this is not something that happened because me or Rusvik are bad players. So now, aside from you or your character being blocked by a variety of different bugs in the environment, this could also go for the projectiles of your weapon, and if it's bullets, then it would most likely just look like you missed the target. But what's even worse is if it's an explosive device that you're trying to throw or that you're trying to shoot, like for example the AT rocket gun. There are many obstacles in the game that are bigger or that are placed in a different area or a slightly different location than it looks based on the textures that you actually see. And what this could mean is that when you're trying to shoot past said object, you're gonna hit the edge of the object even though it's clear that you aimed above it, below it, or besides it, something that can result in it blowing up in your face and even killing you. Now, the interesting thing when I have reacted to that and you get a little bit of a rage moment on the stream is that the only people that are quick at responding to that in the chat are those people that can't see the problem and instead try to call out me for being silly for blaming the game. Now, this is actually very, very common. People that, due to their own lack of experience, can't tell that there is a very obvious problem with the game, and what they do is that they then call out or even insult the player that actually do get affected by said bug. And sometimes my way of trying to explain this phenomenon is if you take an example outside of gaming, and let's say that you're just recently become very, very rich and you want to spend some money and you buy a very nice sports car. Now, you might be an inexperienced driver, but you still want to have a sports car with a engine that has 300 horsepower, but the engine has a flaw, a manufacturing fault, and it doesn't produce 300 horsepower, it only produces 275 horsepower, which is significant to any inexperienced driver. And if you haven't compared a variety of different sports cars with equal amount of horsepower, then you're probably not going to be able to tell that this specific car is lacking 25 horsepower. It probably requires a very, very experienced driver or even a car tester to be able to tell that this engine has a problem. So, at the release of this video, we are just a few days away from the beta of Battlefield 2042 Portal. The open beta, the early access open beta starts October the 6th, and a couple of days later the open beta begins, and I think the early access is only for some of the, maybe all the people that pre-order the game, or if you have to order a specific version of it, it's probably all going to be clear to you once you take a look at Origin or at EA's homepage. But from what I can tell, a lot of people do not want to buy this game until they have made up their minds based on streams and YouTubers such as myself and the feedback that we will provide based on our experiences. Because I have bought the game, I will play the game, I will stream it, and I will cover it on my channels. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Big thanks for watching, and I hope I will see you guys in the next live stream.